Welcome to Azrael Code Lab. In this video, I am gonna show you some basic stuff about servlets. We will discuss about context parameters, how to configure them and why do we need them. Then we will discuss about interservlet communication. So let's get started. Open your IDE. I'm using Eclipse IDE. You can use any other IDE if you want. Go to the File menu, click on New, then select the dynamic web project. Give your project a name, call it Servlet app. You guys can give any name of your choice. Now click Next, leave the default output folder as it is, then again click Next. Here check this checked box, generate web.xml deployment descriptor. This will create a default web.xml file for us, which we can use to configure our values later on. So, here it is, we have our project here. Expand this folder, go to the web content folder, expand web.inf folder. Here it is, Eclipse has created a web.xml file for us. This web.xml is very handy in large-scale applications where huge number of servlets are used. Using context parameters we can store our common data in this file. Context parameters are name-value pairs of textual information that are supplied through this web.xml file. These context parameter can be accessed by any servlet or any JSP across our application. We will see later how to use these context parameters in our servlet. Let's first create a servlet. Now right-click on the src folder, select New, then select Servlet. Give a package name, com.java.servlet.basics. This would be the package name, then give a name for class. Create user is the class name, then hit Finish. Now open it. This is our servlet. Eclipse creates a lot of code for us. It creates a default constructor for us. It generates the doGet method, and also the doPost method, and it also marks the create user servlet with the @WebServlet annotation, and it assigns a URI to it, called create user servlet to it. Remove this default constructor, we don't need it. Remove this doGet method as well, we don't need this either. We are going to use this doPost method. Create a new field here, of connection type, from java.sql library, call it connection. We need a new method for creating database connections. This would be Init Method. Init Method is a good place to create the database connection because it gets called only once in their life cycle of a servlet. The doPost gets called for every servlet request from the web browser from the end user. This Init method takes a parameter of servlet config type, name it as config. This servlet config gives access to all the init parameters, so the web container will load these init parameters when it creates the servlet into this config object, and it hangs the object over to the init method. The first step in this init method is to get the servlet context. We do it by using the config object, config.getServletContext, that will give us a servlet context object. Hit Ctrl+1, assign statement to a new local variable. Eclipse will assign this to a new local variable. Let's call it context. I want to display all the context parameters that are configured in the web.xml, which we haven't configured yet. We will configure it later on. This servlet context offers a method called getInitParameterNames. It is an enumeration of strings. Hit Ctrl+1 and assign it to a new local variable. Call it as parameter names. Now we have to loop through this enumeration to get the context parameters. While parameterNames has more elements, parameterNames.next element, this will get us to the next parameter in the enumeration. Hit Ctrl+1 and assign this statement to a new local variable. Call it element. Now let's print these values. Sysout, within double quotes, a message, saying, context parameter name, :space, plus element. And to get value of it, sysout, within double quotes, a message, context parameter value, :space, plus context.getInitParameter. We are going to call the init parameter by passing the name, which is element. Before we go ahead and implement the database connection, we need to do one additional step while working with Tomcat, because Tomcat has disabled the service provider mechanism, where it will automatically search for the JDBC driver, based on the URL, and load it. It has disabled it due to some memory leak issues. So we need to do a class.forName, that is, we need to load a driver class manually. This is how it used to work before Java 6, before service provider mechanism, and only while working with Tomcat, you have to do this. com.mysql.jdbc.driver. This is the driver class that is present in MySQL jar file. We have to handle this exception. Hit Ctrl+1, then click on Add a try-catch block. Let's move this above block into the try block. Let's create the connection in this init method. Connection is equals to driver manager.getConnection. For parameters, access the parameters using context object, context.get init parameter, and the name is db_url. This is for URL. Copy this, paste it 2 times, for user and password. For second parameter, name is dbuser, and for third parameter, name is dbpassword. We have to handle this exception. Put the cursor on connection, and hit Ctrl 1, add a catch block to the surrounding try block. Now switch to the web.xml file. We have to add our context parameters here. Below this welcome file list closing tag, add a new element. This is where we will add our db_url, username and password. This element is context param. This context param has 2 elements, param value and param name. Add these 2 elements. Give the param name as db_url, and for the param value, jdbc://localhost/, then your database name. In my case it's MyDB. Copy this context param element, and paste it 2 times. We need 2 more context param elements, for username and password. Change this second param name to dbuser, and for the value, it's root. In my case username is root. Change the third context param name to dbpassword, and dbpassword is test. That's it, we have configured all the context parameters. Any servlet in the whole application can access these parameters. This is a good practice to use these type data in a common place. It is also useful when we are deploying our application to different environments. We have to change these data in one file only. Now we need a HTML file. Right-click on Web Content folder, and click on New. Select HTML. Give this file a name, Add User. I have already prepared this Add User HTML file. I will just paste it here. This HTML file has a form, which uses a post method, and it is mapped to add servlet URI, that we have to configure and create user servlet. You can change it here, or you can change it in the create user servlet, but make sure in both places it's same. And it has 4 fields, first name, last name, email, and password. It also has a submit button, for submitting the form. Now go to create user servlet. First change this create user URI, to add servlet, in this web servlet annotation. Scroll down and go to the do post method, remove this to get call here. Create a string, call it first name, string first name, equals to, request.get parameter. The very first parameter is first name, then semicolon. Now copy this line, create 3 more copies for other 3 parameters. In Eclipse shortcut for duplicating is Ctrl, Alt and down key. Now change the second parameter, change it to last name. Set both variable and parameter name as last name. Next parameter is for email. I will quickly check in the HTML file whether it has email field or not. Now change the variable named email, and set the parameter name as email as well. Last one is for password. Change the variable name to password, and set the parameter as password. So we have retrieved all of the 4 parameters. Let me increase this font size. Go to Windows. In Windows, go to Preferences. In Preferences, go to General. In General under Appearance, you will get the Colors and Fonts option. Here you can change the font size. Now let's create a statement object, connection.createStatement. Hit Ctrl 1, assign to this a new local variable. Change the variable name to statement. Hit Ctrl 1 to fix the errors. Surround with try catch. Hit Ctrl D by pointing the cursor, and remove this to do. Create a new variable, int result, for assigning execute update statement. Int result equals to statement.execute update. Since we are going to execute the insert statement, using the execute update method, within double quotes, insert into user table. I have already created this user table. Let me switch to the MySQL workbench. The name of our table is user. We need to pass 4 fields which are of type varchar. So values should go inside single quotes. I think I already have a few records in this table. Let's execute this statement. So there we go, we have a few records here. Insert into user, values. Open the bracket. Here is where it becomes a little tricky. Before this double quote, add a single quote, plus first name, then again plus, double quotes again, close the single quote. After the single quote put a comma, another single quote, plus last name, close the single quotes for last name, comma, open the single quotes for email, plus close the single quotes, comma, the last and final field, open the single quotes, plus password, plus close the single quote, within double quotes, and that's it. And then after the single quotes, close the bracket for what we have opened earlier. So all this string appending, we are doing it because we need single quotes to surround each and every field. That is exactly what we're doing here. Ctrl-Shift-F to format. Print writer out equals to response.getWriter. Now we have to print the response. If result is greater than 0, then print the response. Out.print, within double quotes, h1 tag open, new user created, h1 tag close. If the records get created in the database without any issues, this result should be 1. so we are checking if it is greater than 0. Otherwise you can say, else out.print, within h1 again, error creating the user, close h1 tag, that's it. Now we need a destroy method, for closing the connection. Public void destroy, now close the connection, connection.close. We have to handle the exception, put the cursor on this line, hit Ctrl 1, add a try-catch block. Remove this to-do line. That's it, we are good now. Let's test this. Now right-click on add user.html. Then click on run as, run on server. I'm running it on Tomcat server, Tomcat 8.5 version. It will take a few seconds to start the server. Here is our landing page. Give anything for name, first name A, last name B, email is ab@gmail.com, password is test123. Click on add. It redirects to the response, user created. Let's check in our user table, if this user is there or not. Switch to MySQL. Now we're on this query, scroll down, there it is, our new user is added to the table. Next we gonna create a login page, where we have to log in using the username and password that we added for the user. Right-click on Web Content folder, then click on New, add the HTML file, call it Login. This is going to be a simple HTML page. I will quickly grab this and paste it here. This form will be submitted to a login servlet, which we will be creating later. It uses a post method, and there are two input fields, the email and password. They are named username and password. So when this form is submitted inside the login servlet, we will retrieve these two and validate them against the database. We need another servlet for login. Let's create it. Now right-click on the src folder, click on New, then select Servlet, give it a name, call it Login Servlet. Then hit Finish. Let me first save this login.html. Then double-click to expand. First change this URI in Web Servlet annotation. It should be Login Servlet with a lowercase l. Let's take out all the methods we don't need. Remove this default constructor. Remove the doGet also. We don't need this either. All we care about here is the doPost method. Hit Ctrl D to remove this to do. We need an init method for this servlet, where we can connect to the database. What we can do is, grab the init method from create user servlet and paste it here. Go to the create user servlet, and select this connection field, and this init method. Copy this. Paste this in login servlet. Remove this while block. We don't need it in this servlet. That was just to see what really are these context parameters. For the doPost method, we can do the same thing. Go to the create user servlet, and copy the doPost method. Now switch back to the login servlet and paste it in the doPost method. Remove this first name and last name fields. We don't need these. We need only email and password. Remove this insert statement. We don't need this. Instead of that, we need a select query to fetch the user for the entered email and password. Within double quotes, select star from table name, which is user. Where email equals to, append, start a single quote then double quotes plus, because we are dynamically taking the username, so email will go here, plus, within double quotes again, put a single quote, because in SQL, we need to put single quotes around a varchar or string field. Here within the double quotes, after single quotes, give a space, and, the next field is password. Password equals to, single quotes, plus after the double quotes, password plus, finally close the single quotes, within the double quotes. Now this is select query. We need a different method for select queries. Execute update method is for insert, update and delete queries. This execute query method returns a result set type. Change this integer to result set and result to result set. We have to check the result set to see if there are any records for the given username and password, and do a interservlet forward or include using the request dispatcher. Change this if condition, if result_set.next, so even if there is at least one record, we are going to say request.set attribute. Just to show how servlets communicate, we will say message is the attribute name, and for the value, welcome to Asriel Code Lab. To display the name of user here, we say plus result_set.getString, parameter 1. This will give first name, plus give a space, plus result_set.getString, parameter 2. Remove this print writer, we don't need this here. To forward the request, we need a request dispatcher. Request dispatcher equals to request.getRequestDispatcher. We have to give a URI to which we want to either forward or include. If user ID and password are found in the database, then we will forward the request to home servlet. Now we have to forward the request in response using the request dispatcher object. Request dispatcher.forward and pass request in response as parameters. We are forwarding this request to home servlet that we will create later. If no record is found, user will return to the login page. Request dispatcher equals to request.get request dispatcher, within double quotes, we want to send it back to the login.html page. So just choose that login.html, and a semicolon at the end. Request dispatcher.include, you can forward it the request and response, which are useless in this case because it is a HTML page. You can also forward it to another error servlet, where you can use this request and response. But in this case we are simply sending it back to the login.html. And that's it. Hit Ctrl-Shift-F to format. Our login servlet is ready. We have to create a home servlet now. Go to the Project Explorer, right-click on the package, select a servlet, give it name, Home Servlet, then hit Finish. URI mapping for this servlet is same as the URI and login servlet. The very first thing is to get the print writer, so that we can write a response back to the browser. Print writer, outprint writer equals to response.getWriter. We can set the content type, response.setContentType, is text/HTML. Outprint writer, .print, within this print, request.getAttribute, within double quotes, message. So we're going to get the message that was set in the login servlet into the request, and we are going to write it to the client. We are just showcasing how the interservlet communication can work. We have to implement the doPost method as well, because we are forwarding the post requests. Copy these 3 lines from doGet method, and paste it in the doPost method. That's it, we are good to go now. Now let's see the application in action. Go to login.html, right-click on this file, run on server. This will take a few minutes to start the server, wait for it. Here we go, email is ab@gmail.com, and password is test123. Click on submit, here we go, there it is, our welcome message. I want to add an additional thing here. I want to display a message on the login.html in case of no user is found in the database. First we have to take response.setContentType, within double quotes, text/HTML. Now to print the response we need print writer. Print writer out, equals to response.getWriter. In the else block, we have to print the message. Out.print, within the double quotes, it is a paragraph tag, style equals to, within single quotes, color is red dot, font size is larger. Now for a message, say something like, invalid email or password. That's it, let's test this. Right-click on the login.html, then click on Run on server, wait for the server to start and load the page. Type anything, user that is not present in the table. Hit on Submit, there you go, our error message is displayed. If you guys have made this far, and you find my videos are useful, then don't forget to drop a like and subscribe for more helpful videos like these.